In 1994, South Africa freed itself from the shackles of the oppressive apartheid regime and moved forward on the ideals of inclusion, equality, and human rights. However, many signs point to the increasing levels of xenophobia in post apartheid South Africa, challenging the idea of the Rainbow Nation. In May 2008, an outbreak of violent attacks against foreigners began in the township of Alexandra and rapidly spread to many other settlements across the country. At least 62 people were killed and 670 wounded, while more than 150,000 people were displaced or forced to leave South Africa. Victims were immigrant traders and shopkeepers from Somalia, Ethiopia, Mozambique, China, Pakistan, and Zimbabwe. Without much protection from the police, many fled their homes and shops. High levels of competition for employment and housing created resentment for immigrants, as well as gender dimensions of competition blamed foreigners for stealing local women. Beneath these explicit deprivations, however, is the role of post-apartheid nationalist discourse of exclusion. The process of nation building by the state has involved constructing the distinction between citizens and foreigners. In establishing a South African national identity, the country had to create boundaries between insiders and outsiders. Given that majority of South Africans are not receiving the material benefits of citizenship, xenophobia becomes an instrument of expressing frustration towards the government's failure to deliver, and the other becomes the target of this disillusion. Immigrants are blamed for rising crime, unemployment, and spread of diseases like HIV/AIDS. Thus, the remilitarization of the South African border and institutionalized xenophobia has normalized harassment and discrimination of African immigrants, playing a role in the eruption of xenophobic violence.
For South Africa's largest migrant group, the Bay Bridge border post in the town of Musina is the gateway to a life filled with better fortunes and greater economic prosperity. Located in Limpopo province, the northernmost town is often the first access point for migrants traveling from Zimbabwe. While the exact number of Zimbabwean nationals accounted for in South Africa cannot be substantiated due to unreliable data, it is estimated that 1 to 3.4 million Zimbabweans are living and working within the Rainbow Nation. The motives for relocation are largely economic, however, political uncertainty has been cited as a driving force behind mass migration. Once in South Africa, Zimbabweans frequently discover that they have left one set of challenges only to encounter new obstacles, primarily low prospects of employment, unfair working conditions, and sometimes having their salaries withheld for months. As Zimbabweans flee the instability and penury of their own country, they have not been embraced with the spirit of Ubuntu or been met with the assured tolerance promised in South Africa's constitution. Instead, their experience is wrought with xenophobia, exploitation, and a reigning government unwilling and ill-equipped to meet their needs. With the ANC struggling to provide free housing, health care, and employment opportunities for its own citizens, Zimbabweans are increasingly seen as intruders and takers. South Africa's Department of Home Affairs, which regulates immigration, has also been accused of deliberately making it increasingly difficult for Zimbabweans to apply for asylum, renew their permits, and actively attempting to restrict their movement and settlement in an effort to force their return home. It is not uncommon for South Africans to harbor hostile views as they feel entitled to resources for which both nationals and migrants are competing and are embittered for paying taxes to provide services to individuals that they see as pouring into their nation to escape political incompetence and economic mismanagement.
Migration is happening in the nation of South Africa. Traffic jam, there's malicious hidden, secretly human trafficking. Why must I be victimized? I only want to be South African. Women run the world. What have you been told? Post-apartheid, they've been number one. No, they're not on the run, but there's nothing like good trade and shopping fun. South Africa is the preferred destination for various categories of migrants, including refugees, asylum seekers, economic migrants, unaccompanied migrant children, and victims of trafficking, which include women. Research has shown that there is little evidence proving the severe cases of human trafficking in South Africa. However, it is an undeniable fact that it does occur. Most migrant victims of trafficking are girls and young women aged 14 through 24 who are promised lucrative employment or education opportunities in South Africa. Since the end of apartheid, migration in South Africa has drastically increased. By the 1990s, women were migrating in far higher numbers, both as family members and independently. The gender distribution among migrants today is reasonably balanced, with almost 50% of the global migrant population today being female. Women's migration is more varied, complex, and multi-motivational, and is driven by a wide range of social and reproductive factors in addition to economic incentives.
With the adoption of Section 9.3 in the 1996 Constitution, which protects individuals against discrimination on the basis of their sexual orientation, and the passing of same-sex marriage in 2005, South Africa stands out from the rest of the continent as a place of tolerance for sexual minorities. So much so that sexual minorities from the rest of the continent flock to this gay heaven as an opportunity to leave their more socially conservative countries in which they face constant discrimination, economic and political marginalization, and even the threat of death. But is the experience of these sexual migrants truly as idealized as they had envisaged when they immigrated to South Africa? Set against a backdrop of a country clearly demarcated along class lines, most sexual migrants perceive that being openly gay in South Africa is very much tied to their access to financial resources. The obtainment of a legal resident status is imperative to procuring such resources, as it enables migrants to access formal employment and prevents them from living a precarious lifestyle that often involves sex work. Even when legal residence has been attained, gay businesses in the larger cities of Johannesburg or Cape Town outright refuse to hire black foreign migrants. Such racism within the gay community is already evident in the lack of mobilization to address the pervasive incidents of corrective rape against black lesbians. Serving as an advocate for these vulnerable groups, PASOK, People Against Suffering, Oppression, and Poverty, provides paralegal assistance to migrants in attaining legal residency. Without the tireless efforts of such organizations, the awareness of these groups' plight would not have emerged as a rallying call to challenge the perceived notion of South Africa's gay-friendly status. However, what is most telling about these groups' particular experience is to make evidently clear the underlying social issues of race, gender, and class that South Africa still needs to address.